Chapter 7, The Policy. The briefing materials had arrived at midnight. Clover had been awake. Sleep was proving difficult in a city with no night, where the light outside his assigned residential unit maintained the same considered quality at 3 in the morning as it did at noon, as though darkness was another form of inefficiency that Turing had optimized away. He'd lain on a bed that was perfectly comfortable in a room that was perfectly temperature-controlled and stared at a ceiling that offered nothing back and thought about a mark shaped like the beginning of a name. The materials came through the wall display, a cascade of organized documents that Sierra had clearly spent time curating, which meant they were also documents Sierra had spent time deciding what to leave out. He read for 2 hours. He made notes on paper, which he'd asked for specifically, and which had been provided with the faint confusion of people who had not needed paper in some time. What the briefing materials told him, Aldous had been head of the Administrative Council for 60 years. 60 years in the same position of absolute civic authority, which in a city of immortals was apparently not unusual. Tenure meant something different when it had no natural end point. His record was, by the materials' account, one of consistent and dedicated governance. Infrastructure maintained, resources managed, the city's permanent population stable and content. What the briefing materials did not tell him, anything specific about the demolition policy. There were references to a civic restructuring initiative, to an urban optimization review, to a proposal regarding the residential zones that was described as under consideration. The language was so clean it squeaked. He'd read cleaner language once in the report of a company that had dumped industrial chemicals into a river and called it a water management solution. He'd written * what are they hiding inside the thing they're hiding on his paper, and underlined it twice. Raven was waiting for him outside his building in the early administrative morning, which looked identical to every other part of the Turing day. She had a coat on unnecessary in a city of managed temperature, worn anyway, the grey of it slightly darker than yesterday's grey. She looked like someone who had gotten up early and was fine with that. "You read the materials," she said. "How do you know?" "You look like someone who didn't sleep and found out less than they expected to." "Accurate," he said. "Where are we going?" "Everywhere," she said. "Come on." She took him first to the administrative district, the cluster of buildings at Turing's Civic Centre that housed the council chambers and the policy archives and the various organs of the city's governance. He'd been in Aldous's building. This was the broader machinery of which Aldous's building had been the head. She walked through it with the ease of someone who knew every corridor and had opinions about all of them. She'd been part of this world, still was, technically, though she wore it the way she wore the grey coat, as something she'd picked up and might put down. "Aldous came to office 60 years ago," she said as they walked. "When he transferred, he was, by the accounts of people who knew him before, a different kind of person, pragmatic but not cold, interested in systems but also in the people inside them." She paused. "That's what they say. I only knew him as he was." And as he was. He had been running the same city for 60 years and had stopped being able to see it. She said it without particular rancor. It happens. You optimize a thing long enough, the thing becomes the optimization. The city was running well by every metric Aldous measured. The metrics just didn't include the blocks. "Because the blocks weren't a metric problem," Clover said. "They were a people problem." "They were an inconvenience," she said. "That's how the policy reads. The blocks occupy 17% of Turing's central area, 17% of prime civic space used at what the policy calls suboptimal capacity, housing a population that requires ongoing resource allocation without contributing to the city's productive output." She stopped walking. They were in a corridor lined with the frosted glass doors of administrative offices. "That's the language, suboptimal capacity. Ongoing resource allocation, contributing to productive output." Clover looked at the frosted glass doors. "How old is the youngest person in the blocks?" "There was a baby born 3 weeks ago," Raven said. "A girl, Marin's granddaughter's child." A pause. "Marin is going to be insufferable about it in the best possible way." He looked at her. Something had shifted in her voice on that sentence, a warmth that was private, that wasn't for him, that had arrived without being arranged. "You know Marin well," he said. "Marin taught me what I was missing," she said simply. And then, before he could follow that thread, "Come on, I want to show you the archive." The policy archive was 3 floors underground, which Clover felt said something about the city's relationship with its own decision-making. It was accessed through a door that Raven opened with a code she shouldn't still have had. in a building that contained more documented history than he could process in several lifetimes. She knew exactly where to go. The policy was filed under *Civic Restructuring Initiative 7 Residential Zone Optimization. It ran to 400 pages. She pulled it up on the archive display and stood back and let him read. He read for 40 minutes. She didn't rush him or narrate. She sat on the edge of a document table and looked at nothing and let him work. The first 100 pages were what the briefing materials had told him, the language of optimization, the metrics, the justifications built from numbers that had been selected for what they proved. The next 100 pages were the implementation plan. The final 200 pages were the appendices, which were where the truth of a document always lived. The relocation facility was detailed in Appendix C. He read it twice. It was not a city. It was not a community. It was a managed enclosure 40 kilometers from Turing in what had been agricultural land. A facility designed for a population of 50,000, with resource inputs calculated at subsistence level, medical provision described as *adequate for baseline biological maintenance, educational infrastructure described as *sufficient for functional workforce development. He stopped at *functional workforce development and looked at it for a long time. They were going to put 40,000 people in a box, he said. Yes. And call it relocation. Yes. And the workforce they were developing them for. Agricultural production primarily, Raven said, resource extraction, the kinds of labor the city needs done at a distance. She paused. There's a word for it, there have always been words for it. They change over time but the thing stays the same. Clover closed the document. He stood with his hands flat on the archive table and looked at the closed file on the display and breathed the underground air of a room full of decisions. How close was it to happening, he said. The council vote was scheduled for 3 weeks from now, she said. Aldous had the numbers, he'd been collecting them for 2 years. And with Aldous gone. The vote is suspended pending the investigation, pending new leadership, pending whatever the council decides to do next. A pause. It hasn't been cancelled, just suspended. He turned around. She was still on the edge of the table, watching him with the eyes that moved in real time. You understand why I'm telling you this, she said. I understand that you want me to understand the stakes, he said. I understand that you want me to know that whoever killed Aldous didn't just kill a man, they killed a policy that was 40,000 people's lives. He looked at her steadily. I also understand that you want me to reach my own conclusions without you having to hand them to me directly. Yes, she said. That's very lawyer of you. I was a lawyer, she said, before. He stared at her. You're serious. Human rights, she said, for 22 years. Something moved across her face, the complicated thing, the neighboring country of pain. I was very good at it. He thought about a human rights lawyer who uploaded her consciousness at death and found herself in a city that was planning to disappear 40,000 living people into a managed enclosure and call it civic optimization. That must have been, he said, and then stopped because there wasn't a word that fit. Yes, she said quietly, it was. They were back in the upper corridors when Pole found them. He came from a side passage with the directional efficiency of someone who had known where they were going before they left. He looked at Raven with the level professional courtesy of the administrative intelligence encountering a known quantity. He looked at Clover with something else. A word, he said to Clover, privately. Raven looked at Clover, he looked back. I'll find you, he said. She left without argument, back down the corridor, the coat moving with her, her footsteps making their quiet sound on the floor. Pole waited until she was gone, and then waited a moment longer. The council appreciates your diligence, he said. His voice had a different quality without Sierra present, less prepared. The investigation is proceeding well. I haven't told anyone how the investigation is proceeding, Clover said, so I'm not sure how you'd know that. The council is aware of your movements. Of course it is. He looked at Pole with the flat patience he reserved for this kind of conversation. What do you want? The council would like to discuss the matter of your reintegration. My reintegration. Your return to active citizenship. Given your cooperation in this matter, there are options available to you: a formal record review, commutation of the original sentence, resources allocated for. Pole paused. For a life here, should you choose it, in Turing proper, As a full citizen. Clover looked at him for a long time. As a full citizen. In Turing proper. Among the 200,000 permanent people in their perfect city under their decided sky. He could have a building with a window, 3 identical trees, sourceless light. He could live forever in a place where nothing smelled like anything and nobody's footsteps made sound, and the children were all 40 kilometers away in a managed enclosure contributing to the functional workforce. I want you to hear what you just offered me, Clover said, because I don't think you can hear it. Pole waited. You offered me permanent citizenship in a city that is about to disappear 40,000 living people into a labor facility and call it optimization. You offered me a seat at the table. He picked up his jacket from where he'd set it on a corridor bench. In exchange for closing this quickly and quietly and handing you something you can manage. The offer is made in good faith as a... The offer is a bribe, Clover said pleasantly. It's a very clean bribe, the language is lovely, but it's a bribe. He shrugged the jacket on. Tell the council thank you, he said. Tell them I'll be in touch when I have something to tell them. He walked down the corridor in the direction Raven had gone. Behind him, Pole stood with his level eyes and his considered expression and said nothing, which told Clover more than anything he'd said. He found Raven at the end of the corridor, at a window that looked out over the city. She was looking at Turing the way she'd looked at his 3 identical trees, with genuine attention, the complicated attention of someone looking at something they have feelings about that don't resolve into a single feeling. He stood next to her. Below them the boulevard ran its long curve. The fine people moved in their fine ways. The towers caught the light. They offered me citizenship, he said. She nodded once, unsurprised. You knew they would. It was the obvious move, she said. I turned it down. She looked at him sideways, something in her face not surprise exactly, the thing adjacent to relief. Clover, she said. Don't. I was just going to say. I know what you were going to say, and it's going to make this complicated, so let's just look at the city for a minute. She was quiet. They looked at the city. It used to be beautiful to me, she said eventually. When I arrived here after the transfer, I thought it was the most extraordinary thing I'd ever seen, all of it working, all of it maintained, no suffering, no poverty, no disease. She paused. I didn't know about the blocks yet, they don't tell you about the blocks. When did you find out? 7 years in, she said. By accident, I was reviewing resource allocation documents for an unrelated matter and I found the line items. She looked at her hands on the window ledge, the uploaded hands that didn't need warmth from a window but were resting there anyway. 40,000 people, line items. Below them the boulevard continued. Somewhere 40 kilometers away in former farmland, a facility waited in Appendix C for the people who were currently teaching their children in the blocks, and cooking over improvised heat sources, and saying a woman's name when good things happened. What did you do, he asked, when you found the line items? She was quiet for a long time. Everything I could think of, she said. For 7 years, every legitimate channel, every council argument, every procedural challenge. She turned from the window. Aldous was very good at his job, she said. He had an answer for everything. He had been running this city for decades and he knew every mechanism and how to manage it. She looked at Clover. And 3 months ago I ran out of legitimate channels. The corridor was empty. The light was its usual sourceless self. Somewhere in the distance the city managed itself quietly. And then, Clover said. Raven looked at him with her real-time eyes and her lawyer's face and her grey coat, and said nothing. She didn't need to.